So let me get this straight. You're going to teach us how to paint water?
I might. I'm definitely going to show you some techniques that I use to paint water, and then really what I'm getting at, why I started painting water, is because it helps me to be more the nature of water. So I'm going to do a little of both. I'm going to show you how to paint some water, some techniques there, and then how it helps me.
Okay, I'm just going to show a couple of your water paintings. If you guys want to learn how to paint water, we want to learn how to do this or this or this, reflections, wow, or this, then you want to hang with us today, because Clint Howard is going to show us how to do that. Let's get this show officially started, shall we?
It's Art School Live with Eric Rose.
My guest today is Clint Howard, and he's a rock star painter, and you're going to get an opportunity to see what he has to offer all the way from Arkansas. Clint, take it away, baby.
All right. Thanks, baby. All right. So, yeah, I'm going to use some soft pastels today. I'm a pastel painter, but really these techniques can apply to any type of painting. Maybe not you watercolorists. I don't know. It's a little bit different in the watercolor world, but definitely your opaque painting medium. And I just really love water. I'm going to mark out my thirds real quick. I just grew up around water, fishing, camping, hiking, and all that. And so I've always just been drawn to it naturally anyway.
Okay, tell people what you're doing when you're marking out thirds.
Yeah. So what I want to do is I'm thinking about composition, obviously, and I want to try to put some interesting parts of my painting where these 1/3 lines meet up somewhere, probably in this area where that tree shadow comes down is kind of what I'm thinking. But in this exercise, I'm really more interested in getting the effects of the water, the opacity, the transparency. And so I'm just marking out to get a nice layout. Helps me with my drawing as I go.
Hey, Clint,
Yes, sir.
We're having problems with your microphone. Go ahead and switch back to what you had before real quickly. And while you're doing that, I'll show people one more time what we've got here. We have Clint Howard is painting water today. He's going to show you how to do it using pastel. And he is a terrific water painter and rocks, really beautiful stuff. And you're going to learn how to do this if you just hang with us for just a little while. So we're just waiting for Clint to change his microphone out and see how that works out. And Clint, are you ready? Okay. Well, he'll be here in a second, I'm sure.
I'm getting there.
Okay. All right. Let's try it.
Is that better?
We're getting a breaking up sound. Let's try it now.
All right. Is that any better?
Let's try and see how it goes.
Okay. All right. Well, I apologize for the issues. We did a little testing beforehand, but things don't always come out that great. So again, I'm using soft pastels. I'm going to start with a harder pastel here. I'm not really doing an underpainting today. If you're familiar with pastel painting, a lot of times we'll do an underpainting, but today I'm just going to just dive right in and start at the top of this scene. Wow. Not really going for exact because I want to break away. I'm really like a left-brained artist. I really try. I tend to paint realistically and literally, but I want to push myself and break away from that a bit. So this is an attempt to do that. So I'm laying down my main colors here, kind of like blocking in like you would in acrylic or oil painting, but just getting some colors going here.
So you're painting upside down.
I am painting a reflection. So this water, this is into the river. So we have a beautiful river here, the Buffalo National River. And it's amazing. And this is winter time, and I just took this picture into the water, so I'm looking at the reflections in the water. And cool. That's really what helps me with painting water is that abstract picture of it, because then it's no tree, it's a reflection of the tree, so upside down. It's a little bit blurry. So it helps me to be more expressive and abstract. All right, as I go down here, one thing I'm going to definitely do is leave my paper where the lights are. Pastels, we usually work dark to light. I'm not going to really stick to that a lot here, but that's generally the way we want to work. But definitely, if you have lights and you're working in pastels, you want to leave paper for lights, because if you start putting darks down, it's going to really get in the way.
Hey, Clint.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're having some audio problems. We've got a couple of suggestions for you. Our apologies, everybody. Number one is if you have something plugged in for audio, turn the plug a little bit and see if that makes a difference. And then if that doesn't work, then we're going to have you sign out and then sign back in and see if that makes a difference. All right? Because we aim to please. We want to give everybody the best possible, and we want you to have the best possible too. And
yeah. Okay. So I have the charger plugged in. I unplugged that. I'm just using the camera or the phone audio. So let's try that a little bit. Maybe the plug-in was affecting it some. So I'm working on a little bit of dark areas just to get these shadows about where I want them, so the trees are reflecting down here.
okay, we're going to ask you to sign out and sign back in. I apologize, everybody, but the audio is a problem. We want to make sure we give you best possible chance. So, okay, so apologies, folks. Anyway, we're going to be painting water with Clint Howard, and we want to give you good audio. Just to tell you a little bit, to stall for a minute while he's re-signing up, we have a big event coming up. It's called Pastel Live Online. It's 3 days plus a fourth optional Essential Techniques Day at the beginning. And we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people coming from all over the world. It's going to be a lot of fun. And some of the world's great artists are going to be teaching. And so we'd love for you to come and join us on Pastel Live. If you don't know how to paint pastel, good time to learn. If you do, good time to get better at it. And let's see if we got Clint back now. Clint, let's try this one more time.
I'm here. Let's see. Let's see if it works.
Okay. Well, let's keep trying here.
Okay. All right. So I got some darks in just to get my shadows, these darker reflections, in the place that I want them. And I'm really somewhat doing an underpainting, but not quite, just kind of directly into it. Now I'm a blender. I like to blend, so I'm going to move some of this around just using my fingers. I am using a sanded surface today, but if you're gentle with your blending, then it doesn't really affect your fingers too much. Some pastel. All right, I'm going to leave these lights here for a little bit later, and I'm going to start in on some of these other colors. So laying in some warm green. I'll probably cool that off here in a minute. Just trying to get my colors in the right place. See if we can get some of those highlights from the top down now. And this is the beautiful thing about pastel. You get that layering effect that's difficult to achieve with paint. One of the reasons I love pastel is you get that dark underneath, and then you can scumble over, or we lightly drag the pastel over the top, and you get a great contrast between that background color and the foreground color, the one you put on top there. And I'm not being real precise here. I'm probably never going to get precise in this painting because I'm trying to be more abstract and more expressive, but I'm at least trying to get some of these colors where I want them. All right, I like how this is in my reference is a bit cooler up here up top, so let's cool that off just a little bit. All right, let's switch to a different dark color here just to get some variation. So I have a dark blue here, just trying to get a little more variation in those shadows. And then I'm going to start feeling out where I want some of the sides of these rocks that are underwater. They've got a shadow on one side here, and I don't have to be perfect, I don't have to be exact, but I just want to get that sense of that there's rocks underneath the water and that there's shadows there. Okay, I think it's time that I need to start putting in some of this sky reflection just so I can get the right balance. So I'm going to use this strong blue. It's more on the violet side, the indigo side of blue, but it's still a blue. So just get a little bit of that in there. Maybe a little bit lighter one. I'm dragging over the top of that. I was watching a pastelist the other day on your show, and she talked about how pastels are great because you don't have to mix colors. You don't have to think about color mixing. But the good thing about pastels is that you can mix if you really want to. And so I have kind of a greenish blue here, and I can mix that in with those blues that I've already laid down. And by blending with my fingers or with a blending tool, you can get some nice effects. All right, I'm gonna go with this is more of a gray, kind of a warmish gray, just to get some variation. All right, let's lighten that up. I think one thing that confuses people about painting water is, and I've seen this question asked many times, how do you get that glare effect, that transparent effect? Do you lay down a bunch of stuff and then layer a color over it? Maybe you would do that in some other types of painting, but you can't really do that with pastels, and I don't think it would work real well in most types of painting. But really, it's just about color selection. So if you can forget that this is water and just think about the colors that you're seeing in your reference, and just treat them as little shapes, little spots of color, that's going to give you the best effect. And again, I think that's why painting water just helps me so much, to be a little more abstract, to get away from my default, which is more realistic or literal in my painting. But painting water, it just has that abstract feel to it. When you get to the ripples and you get to the sometimes washed out colors, and then you get these interesting shapes. All right, this is a little more purpley blue, a little bit warmer. Okay, so now I'm going to share one of my secrets. So don't tell anybody this. But this tool, I got at a dollar store. It's just a squeegee tool. And it used to be bigger. It used to have wings on either end like this. And I cut them off. And then I cut little ridges into this tool. So it's just a flexible rubber squeegee tool. And I cut those little ridges in there so that when I drag it across the pastel, it leaves those lines in there, which is great for water because you get that ripple effect. And it's also great. So I'm going to start at the top here. And in my reference, I can see back here, things are tending to go down. So I'm just going to add some streaks, and it's pretty subtle, but I just want to try to start blending that into water. You can see some streaks showing up over here. Water is very horizontal and vertical. Again, I think one of the mistakes that beginners with water make is trying too many angles, but it's almost always horizontals and verticals. You're almost always thinking in those two planes. There are times where the currents change, like in a river, and you get a little bit of angle. But especially on a lake or a still body of water, you want to think horizontals and verticals. And often, when you get in the distance on a lake scene or something, you're going to go more horizontal. And then when you get closer, you're going to go more vertical, except for maybe some horizontal ripples. Now this scene is completely different because it's a little more up close and it's in a river, and I'm going abstract, so I can do what I want. So I'm kind of combining those two. And I am getting I'm picking up some pastel, and as I lay it back down, I'm getting these lines in there, but I don't care about that because I'm just trying to be expressive here. All right, I'll come back to that tool in a minute. I'm going to show you some other tricks with that. So I want to start carving into this color I laid down before. And this is where the secret to water comes in. You have to have that contrast. If you want that glare effect, if you want it to read as water, you have to get that contrast. And it could be a contrast between darks and lights. So the edges of these shadows here, I'm going to really play that up here in a bit to start carving into that. But it could also be a contrast in color as well, contrast in temperature. So this really cool blue gets some warmer greens. If I just start putting some of that up here, then you really start to get that glare effect. It starts to feel like water. All right, let's switch to a nice dark down here. And I'm intentionally trying not to get into the details. That's difficult for me. I want to get up close and I want to kind of carve into this. I used to draw a lot, so that bleeds over today, but I want to be more expressive here, and I want to be more abstract. All right, let's bring in some of this color here. Okay, so when I get to some of these rocks under the water, they have definite shape to them. And I don't care to get the exact shape, but I do want some of those angled edges. So I'm going to start adding a little bit more pressure and just get some hints at some rocks under the water there. Let's try some of these back here. I really like on the left side of the scene, there's these kind of almost cobblestone looking rocks, typical river rocks. They've got that nice shadow between them, kind of broken up there. I'll come back and add some more shadow. Got some interesting effects in the rock face. So what you're looking at under this water, we have a lot of limestone and makes these shelves under the water. And so you get all this cracking and variation in the stone itself. And so you begin to see that here. That's not quite what I'm looking for. I think this might be too light, but let's try it. It is too light, but I'm going to go back to my blending tool and I'm going to just tone it down a little bit. All right, I'm going to add some highlights So this is all water that you're seeing in the reference photo. The shoreline is actually just above where this picture ends. So I'm seeing all water, but I'm seeing a brush, plant life that's right above this shoreline, and it leaves these streaks at the top of my reference photo in the reflections. I really like those, so I'm going to pull that in. And I'm going to start using this color down here just to play up a little bit of that light bouncing off of some lighter colored rocks. Get a little bit in here. Okay, let's switch back to that water now. So underneath this glare of the reflection from the sky, we obviously have a lot of rocks, and I just want to vary my color in there a little bit. So I'm going to go back to that blue-green we had before and just add a bit more of that in some places. So this could be algae. It could just be some greener colored rocks on the bottom. And then I'm going to look for a pale yellow. It's not too light. Maybe this. No, not quite. And we'll go back to this and we'll just kind of blend it in. That's a little too much. Let's go with this one here. So another thing I love about doing scenes like this is I begin to see maybe compositional elements that I wouldn't think about otherwise. And I'm noticing that sandy or rocky bottom that's lighter almost starts to give me a spiral. And if I want my focal point to be in this area, maybe I can use that to lead in, kind of spiral around if I arrange my reflections appropriately in this bit of gravel that's under here. All right, back to my handy dandy tool, just blur that out a little bit, make it feel like it's under the water. All right, let's get a little more of this lighter blue in there and really start to play up those sky reflections. And I want to kind of keep that spiral going around, so I'm not going to necessarily follow the reference now. I'm going to try to follow this and maybe put a little bit of a glare in here, some down here, just as reference points, because I want to bring that around. And it'll be subtle. I don't want a major spiral in there.
Would you explain to everyone what the purpose of the squeegee is for the people who joined late?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just a dollar store squeegee, and this is what it would look like originally. And I cut off the edge off both sides, and then I put some notches in it. And what that does, it's really like how you'd use a squeegee in painting, like a Charlie Hunter or Douglas Fryer, where they use a squeegee a lot and get some nice effects. And I'm doing the same thing with the pastel. So if I drag it over the surface, especially in a water scene, and it can help play up that blurriness. I also use it a lot of times on the edges of my paintings to get that peripheral vision effect where it can kind of blur. So it's a way to blend your pastel, but in a controlled way, because I can use my fingers, but it's not as controlled and I don't get those streaks and lines that I want to get, especially when I'm painting water. So it's pushing that pastel dust into the surface of the painting, into this sanded surface. Now, here's the trick. I mentioned earlier, I'm going to show you a trick. Let me add a little more pastel to this. You got to have enough pastel on the surface to make this work well. So let me get around these a little bit. And then if we turn it sideways on the hard edge, then we can get some lines to give that water effect. The
So there's a question from Carl who says, what kind of technique do you use to separate shoreline from reflection?
Oh, that's a good question. We don't have that in this painting, but let's just pretend that we did.
All right, let's pretend.
Let's pretend. So I'm going to add some gravel. So we've got this sandstone gravel here on the river's edge. And so let's say I got a gravel edge there. It depends on the environment, the situation, the sunlight and all that, of course, but you almost always, first of all, have a darker edge. And I like to make sure it's nice and broken because what will happen is the sediment, debris from the river, in this case, will wash up along that edge and kind of pile there. It'll create a little bit of a darker edge. And so that's one way. You want to break that up. You don't want a nice hard line, so make sure it's broken. The other thing, which is not the case in this painting at all, but if you have some nice sunlight and some of those other pictures, in fact, the one that's the kind of turquoise and red-orange one that you showed earlier, one of my paintings, will have, I don't know what to call these exactly, but I call them light seams. I don't know what the exact terminology for it is. Let me find a, since we're pretending, I'm going to darken this shoreline just a little bit. And then whenever you have an object that comes out of the water, it will create a bulge in the surface tension. So that water actually curves either up as it tries to adhere to that rock or whatever's coming out of the surface, or sometimes it actually creates a little bit of a bulge. And it's, you wouldn't see it unless you got up close. But what that does is it creates a different reflective surface, a different shape. And you get these little highlights. So if it was a rock or something, if you just notice those in your reference photos, you get these little lines of highlights and little spots, again, broken. And that can kind of give you that effect that there's water meeting a solid object coming out of the surface. All right, enough pretending. We're only pretending here anyway. This is all pretend. I'm just using my reference photo as a reference photo. I'm trying to get away from it because again, I tend to be much more literal in my paintings. So I want to get away from that a little bit. There's some warmer rocks in here. As I say that, I'm painting what I see. And I like this color up here. Now that we have that shoreline, we don't have that strong orange up there anymore. So I'm going to just, I'm sorry, whoever it was that asked that question, you don't get a shoreline anymore. And let's bring a little bit of that in here. Okay, before I add some glare, more glare reflections, because I definitely want that. I want these to be sharper, because that's the other thing about water. You get these, not everywhere, but you get these sharp, contrasty edges, especially where there are ripples. So we're going to play that up here in a minute. But I want to, let's use this color. I want to play up some of the shadow between these rocks that are under the surface.
So are those shadows, if that was normally a brown shadow, because it's underwater, would you change the color?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, these rocks down here are the same rocks that are up here. And so because of the sky reflection, I've painted rocks, but they're all in the blue family. And again, that's the key with painting water. You're not trying to paint transparency. You're not trying to paint a liquid, because our pastels are definitely not liquid. They're the farthest thing from it. And so I'm never going to get that. So I have to paint the colors. So everything here is in the blue color family, and I'm just gonna vary my blues. Some of it's going to be a little bit warmer blues for some of these rocks that are kind of grayer in color. In real life, if you pulled them out of the water, they'd be nice and probably a warm gray. But under the water, they're really kind of a cooler gray, or even a just slightly warmer blue. So yeah, and here, when you have a reflection that's dark, like these trees that are up here, and that's why you're seeing more under the surface here. When you have that dark reflection, you can see right through the water. And obviously, with my photo editing, I've really played up the colors in this scene. This isn't exactly what it looked like in real life, but those colors definitely get washed out. They get turned blue when there's a reflection. But even trees, the color of that tree is going to influence the color of the things that are under the water. So the best thing you can do is just look at your photo, and instead of painting what you think is there, paint what you actually see in your photo. What color do you actually see? If I was going by my natural instinct, under here I'd be thinking, well, there's brown rocks and there's gray rocks, so I need some browns and grays, but I don't want to go brown and gray, because then it loses that effect of the sky reflecting if I get out of the blue family down here.
Well, this is helpful because
All right.
I was painting rocks underwater this weekend. I was not underwater. I was painting rocks underwater.
Yeah. Sometimes I wish, I did some paintings the other day where I stuck my phone, I put it in a waterproof case, but then I stuck my phone under the water and took some photos and video looking up out of the water, and then did some paintings. Just, again, really neat way to get some abstract views, and still based in reality. I think all abstraction is really based in some kind of reality, but you can tell what it is, but it's much more abstract, and that helps me a lot. All right, I've got a little darker here. I think I want to go even. I'm going to get my black hard pastel. I don't like to use it very often, but every once in a while, it just to get this contrast here in this focal point, it's called for. Now, when we use pastels, those of us who are pastelists, we're kind of snobs, and we like to call it painting. And the reason we call it painting and not drawing is because we're using the side of our pastel, and we're laying down lots of color, and we're making little marks with the edges of our pastel. And so we're not drawing these in. I'm just making interesting marks, and that's kind of my goal here, is just to be expressive. If you ever watch Alan Picard paint, you can definitely see this happen. Marla Baguette is the same way. Alan, he'll just hit it and kind of step away. That's the way he works, because he's just trying to make those little expressive marks. He's not trying to draw a rock. He's trying to draw a mark that represents a rock. So there's some darker shadows along this rock edge. So I'm just going to play that up a little bit. I have this nice purpley blue. I just noticed there's some nice up here, so we can get some great complementary color going up here. And I want to throw this down here just a little bit. I think I'm going to use it for this rock, but I'm going to then blend it out. So I want a little bit of it to represent a shadow there, but not too much of it.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
Yeah, and this is where I'm breaking the rule. In pastels, we normally go dark to light, but a lot of times in pastels too, you'll come back in and add some extra darks just for accent. But I'm not really following the rules here because we're being a little more abstract and expressive, and I didn't do an underpainting, so it doesn't matter as much. All right, we've got some really neat texture over here that I kind of want to get in there. So I'm trying to find the right, I don't want to go too dark with it. So on this side, if you're looking at the reference photo, it's very close to the same color, but there's just a little bit of variation. I think that's a pretty good color. So I'm going to do some scumbling. I'm going to drag over the surface. I'm going to add some lines in. And then there's one over here. I'm going to pull some of that in here. I think there's some of that down here. All right, we could do this all day, but let's start working on some more of this glare because we got to get the feeling that this is water. So I'm making some nice, strong impasto marks. We can make impasto marks with our pastels, even though it's pigment and binder and just basically a bunch of dust. If you push hard and just kind of leave it there, it'll stay kind of cake together. And then I'm not going to paint every ripple. I'm just going to represent the ripples. Here I'm going to just scumble it because I want that texture. All right, let's talk about that for a minute. So right up in this area, I got some glare, but it's very mottled because of the foliage. It's not a bright blue coming through there. So if I just scumble a little bit, then I can get it like it's peeking through, and that's just enough to get that effect there. And this is also a great effect if you're doing sparkles on distant water. If you have a dark underpainting, say down here, a darker color underneath, and then if you just kind of drag over the surface with a very light color, then you'll get that sparkle effect in the distance. Make sure I vary my blues. Blues over here are even darker than that. Get the right values in here. I don't want all my reflections to look the same. And I'm being a little bit distracted, just trying to away from my reflections up here, but I want to include some more of this blue just so it harmonizes a little bit better. A little bit of this bluish purple color here, just to vary some of that. And now I'm trying to make a decision because I've got a reflection right in here, but that's right in the middle of my painting almost. And I don't know if I want to include it too much. I'll just probably scumble a little bit and try to keep that spiral shape that we talked about earlier. Carve into these a bit. So I'm coming in on the side over here. That's kind of interesting. Okay, let's go back. Now that I got some more of that purple, I think I want to pull some more of this yellow in, maybe even this color. And the great thing about this is you could go for days just tweaking, playing with it, taking your squeegee, messing it up, coming back over it. I mentioned Douglas Fryer earlier, and just really appreciate his ability to not get too caught up in what he has and just almost destroy the painting for the sake of going over and making something better. So we don't care about messing it up a little bit. We can always do it again. You take your own reference photos, Eric?
I try to plein air paint whenever possible.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I have got two girls and then a wife, and trying to get some plein air painting in. I haven't really. I've got the setup, but I haven't really got started yet. But I really like to. But I have found that if I can't do that, then just being on the lookout constantly for reference photos, and then it gets you in that creative state almost every day. And if you can get in that creative state, um, trying to make things, not being consuming all the time, really helps my mental health at least.
Well, whatever it takes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I used to hook up the baby monitor and onto my easel and go outside and paint in the backyard
Yeah.
or the front yard with the kids in their cribs.
Yep. Yeah, I started dabbling with pastels about 15, 20 years ago, but then I put them down until a couple of years ago um, after having kids. And it wasn't their fault, but it was just, it can be a challenge. And especially with pastels, all the dust and trying to find a space.
Yeah. Your daughter
Concerned about that.
Morgan is on the chat. She says, "This is my dad. He is so talented and I'm very proud of him."
Oh, thanks, Morgan.
It's pretty cool when your dad's on YouTube. My kids think it's like,
Yeah, they're both my daughters, and my wife, very, very supportive and very artistic. Both of my daughters are very, very talented artistically. Morgan can draw really well, and my younger daughter, Michaela, she loves to craft. She likes to paint and stuff as well. But that's her thing. She loves to craft with just about anything.
that's cool. So this is the fine tuning stage. Going in.
It is, but I know Eric, that can go on for forever, and that's one thing I'm trying to break free of a little bit is too much of that. I tend to be more literal and realistic, so we're pretty close to where I would probably leave this one. Maybe a few more finishing marks. I'll go back in with my handy dandy squeegee tool and let's just add some of those ripple marks in here. And then I'm going to come back in and add some of those streaks. And I almost always like to really blur out my edges, just kind of a style, just to get that style I go for, to get that peripheral vision blurriness effect, and then focus in a little bit more on your focal point, which I kind of said is right there. So let's add a little bit more dark just to get some of those tree branches in there. If you don't have a squeegee tool, on a smaller scale, your fingernail. I usually use my pinky fingernail, and you can get some scratches in there that are nice little ripple marks. And pedicure or manicure at the same time.
Yeah, sand
Because
off
I'm on
your fingernails.
Yeah, yep. Oh man, when I first started painting with pastels and using the sandpaper, there were times where I got some spots on my fingers from blending too much, but I think I've got the hang of it now. I try not to blend as much.
There's a question
as
from
well.
Andreas. Have you ever used a charcoal blending stick?
I have tried a little bit, but I don't like the effect as much because, especially on a sanded surface, it's just gonna those tortillons or whatever you call them. It's just gonna tear up that paper. You can get by with it for a little bit, but I've just always been a finger blender mostly, and then I've found this tool. And then Andrew McDermott uses another tool that's kind of like a bunch of little rubber fingers that's actually made for sculpting. And so it gets some interesting line effects in your painting as well. But go to the dollar store and just pick up anything that's kind of rubbery. Go to the kitchen section, go to the cleaning section, and experiment.
If you guys are enjoying this, make sure to give a thumbs up or a heart or a happy face or an applause or something. Be great. Hello, New Zealand. There's a couple from New Zealand today. Welcome. In New Zealand, the upside down reflections are right side up.
Yep.
To us, not to them.
You know, I think that's why this also helps me, because now this tree is upside down, you know, and now I'm not painting a tree anymore. I'm just painting shapes. And, you know, there's that old trick of turning your reference upside down, or even putting it in a mirror or something, just something to make it get out of your head and see it as something else. And so water really can help you do that.
So fun to paint water.
It definitely is. Just I love the calming aspect of it, the serenity of it, or the dynamic nature of it sometimes. All right, I want to wrap up here just by pulling in a little more of this dark blue. These shadows here a little bit, or reflections are a little bit cooler through here. So this is a 9x12. I work a lot in 9x12 because pastel paper often comes in that size. But what I'll do pretty often is, if I like something in this size, then I'll take it up a notch. Working big is a little bit more challenging in pastel because our pastels are so small. You can get larger pastels, but not the variety of softness and color in those larger sizes. So it gets a little bit challenging to work large. So you want to be prepared for it.
Hello, Norway. I want to come to Norway and paint. Let's go to Norway.
Okay, let's just strengthen up. Got some different oranges here. Just pull in some variety up here. Just adding some texture.
If you guys like what you see, make sure you share it so other people can discover it. We want everybody to learn to paint.
There's that rock under there, but I don't want it too strong.
So you really soften those edges a little bit, right?
Yeah, I tend to soften them down, and you don't always have the right color in pastels. You know, obviously, if you're working with paint, you can almost always mix the right color, but we only have a limited selection. In fact, I'm working with my plein air setup, so I only have limited colors. So if I lay a little bit down and then blend it just a bit, and then I can come back and redefine that edge if I want to, either with the shadow color or highlight color. But yeah, that's the way for me to get the right color that I'm looking for, the right color temperature. Especially in these blues, it's really challenging to get the right blues. Greens are that way too. You know, everybody knows greens can be a challenge.
Here's
But
a
if you put some
question.
green down, yeah, go ahead.
Clint, what makes you decide to do an underpainting or not?
Part of it is laziness. You know, if I just want to dive in and do a study, underpainting takes a little bit longer, and I just have limited time. I get up nearly every morning to try to paint, at least in the weekdays, and I just have limited time for it, and an underpainting takes a little bit longer, especially if you do a watercolor underpainting or an alcohol wash. You got to wait for that to dry before you can paint over it. But one of the main defining factors for me is, aside from laziness and time, is probably the texture. Do I want the color of the paper to peek through and leave that texture? And Jacob Aguiar is incredible, exceptional at this. If you go look up his work, I've been in his mentorship program for almost about a year and a half now, and he's exceptional at that, of not doing an underpainting and letting the paper peek through. I'm still working on that, but that's really I think the defining piece for me.
All
And of
right.
course, you can tone your paper or get different colored papers, and then that keeps you from having to do an underpainting as well. I say keeps you from having to as if it's a problem or an issue, but it's really not. It's just kind of a preference thing.
Hey, before you go, will you show us your plein air pastel box? Is it possible?
Yeah, I can do that. I got to take this out of the holder. Let me clean my hands off a little bit. That's the other thing about working with pastels. And I always keep a pack of cheap, unscented baby wipes nearby.
Lanolin
And you
is
can clean your
great.
hands off between colors, or if you're going to touch your phone. But my phone still gets dirty all the time.
Awesome.
You're
I
going to
hope
jerk
you guys
around a
have
little bit.
enjoyed this. Okay, now we're going to see the paint box. Oh, that's
There we
nice.
go.
Did you build that
And
yourself?
I did not. This is I won't tell you where I got because I'm not supposed to mention brand names, but it's a cheaper option and it works great. You can get expensive boxes. You can get, uh, just like any plein air setup, you can go expensive, but I wanted to stay small and stay cheap just to try it out. But yeah, that's my box. And then over here is my working palette here on the right. That's what I've been working from.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I try to add to that.
Then you're not having to
So I
dig
keep
for
track of
every
it.
color every time.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you so much for being on, Clint. It's terrific having you here, and I have a hunch we're going to get a chance to meet in person, but I can't talk about that because it's a secret.
Yeah. I will try to keep this secret. It'll be tough, but
Oh no, wait a
we'll
minute. You're
see what
going to
we can do.
try? No,
Yeah.
you're going to keep it.
Yep.
You're
Yep.
going to keep it. All right, but you'll be hearing from me in a couple of weeks, if not sooner.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you so much for doing this today. Everybody give a thumbs up and applause to Clint. Outstanding.
Yes.
Clint
Thank you
Howard.
so much for having me. Really
Make
appreciate
sure
it.
you visit his Instagram, his website. We put it all in the chat, so it's right there for you. And make sure you share this with other people. Clint, thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Okay, that was Clint Howard, and that was exceptional. It's nice to see how reflections are done in water, and that was really worth seeing. So good job on that, Clint. Hey, you guys, a couple of things. I've got a free gift. Yay! Free gift for you. You go to pasteltoday.com/ebook and you get this 45 pastel pointers from the pros. If you like pastel, this is a good thing to do. And if you like pastel or you want to learn pastel, then come to Pastel Live. It's coming up just a couple of weeks on September 18th. The 17th is the beginning of our Essentials Day. Hundreds of people from all over the world are attending, and it's 3 to 4 days. 3 days if you just do the event, 4 days if you do the essential techniques. And if you can't attend live, you can also watch replays. But it's spectacular live because you get to interact with the artist, ask questions, and we have some brilliant artists, some of the most brilliant pastel artists on earth. We're teaching, and you cannot help but learn. If you're watching this for 3 or 4 days, you are going to get so informed. You're going to get all the tips and techniques, and then you just got to try them and practice them and get good at them. So that's really good. That's Pastel Live. And we also have coming up right after Pastel Live in November, it's hard to believe we're coming up on the fall. I mean, we are in fall now officially, right? So Realism Live is coming up in November, the 13th through the 15th. And that's all realistic subjects and both impressionistic realism and tight academic realism. So it's going to be really terrific. And then, of course, we have Watercolor Live coming up in January. That is, I think that's our largest. And then we have Acrylic Live coming up in March. Next thing you know, it'll be summer again. And we have a lot of other things going on too. Hey, I'm excited. I'm in the Adirondacks right now. I'm going to be here not too much longer. I'm going to be heading out to Fall Color Week, and I don't even know if there's any seats left. We had sold out, then we had 10 seats come open because the hotel or the facility had extra seats come open. So I think we sold most of those. If not, you can go check it out. Go to fallcolorweek.com. Join me for my retreat. It'll be a lot of fun. And there's some big announcements coming up very soon. One big announcement recently was that Joseph Zbukvich, the great watercolorist from Australia, is coming to a pre-convention workshop at the plein air convention. That's a big deal. Another big announcement is that Scott Christensen, the great oil painter, gouache painter, is going to be teaching a pre-convention workshop at the plein air convention. So both of those are going to be spectacular. That's coming up in Lake Tahoe in May. So you want to make sure you check that out. Hey, thanks for tuning in. We're here every weekday. We would love for you to subscribe on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, look up Art School Live, and then also hit the little bell so that gives you a notification. And of course, if you can follow on Instagram, Facebook, etc., that'd be great. Just follow at Eric Rhodes. It disappeared, but anyway, we'll show it to you one more time. Just go to to Art School Live on YouTube. All right, and then follow on Instagram and others. All right. Thank you for being here. I'm glad to be back. We managed to do Art Marketing Monday yesterday. Thank you to Carrie Stober, who filled in for me while I got a little vacation time most of last week. I took the 3 days in the middle off, which was kind of nice. And it was my big birthday. I'm not telling you which one. I think it was 50. That was it. Yeah. Can if you believe that. Okay. Thank you, guys. Have a great day. And thanks again to our guests. Bye-bye.